Welcome to With All Due Respect. This is a podcast for women over 40 who are looking for sane, frank advice about their health and wellness, especially through and after menopause. I'm Amanda Thebe, a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and the author of the best-selling book, Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. I'd love you to join me every week as I chew the fat with some fab guests on hot topics that directly impact you. I also know the power of conversation is lost, and there's nothing better than sitting down for a natter with your mate and putting the world to rights. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with this podcast. We'll really get to know my guests, warts and all. I've made it my mission to help you by exploding a few myths and presenting you with plain, simple facts. These inspiring conversations will hopefully empower you to be a healthy, strong, resilient bitch, just like me. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review, and then visit me at amandathebe.com. And now let's get started on today's show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to With All Due Respect. I'm Amanda Thebe, and today on the podcast, I have Stephanie Kruse. Now, Stephanie is the host of a brilliant podcast called Good Enough for Now. I've been a guest on there, which is probably why I like it. It's just got this really great focus on, how we can show up and turn up, but without having these extra high expectations on ourselves. And it comes from a place where Stephanie has got lived experience, and just through the interviews with all of her guests, has got a really great take on this. So as we bring Stephanie in, I sort of just want to tell you a little bit about her from somebody who was a leader in marketing and consumer insights for brands like Gap, Banana Republic, Yahoo, and Dell. She took an unexpected detour from her corporate role and then went into her own consulting practice. And there was an upheaval with where she was living and a different environment as well. And so all of this made Steph just reflect on, what am I going to do next and what does that look like? And so I'm really happy to have you here, Steph. Thank you for coming on the show. So let's get stuck in. First of all, welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. It's so nice to be here with you and to get to chat with you.
Right. So, but let's be honest, because we know we don't like telling fibs on this show. Let's be honest. This isn't the first time we've chatted on my show, is it?
No, in fact, it's completely on brand for Good Enough for Now. What happened the first time that we chatted, we had a whole interview. We were so happy with ourselves. And then you discovered
I hadn't recorded it because, oh my God, it's the first time it's ever happened, actually. The very, very first time it's ever happened to me. And I'm I think I was so excited to talk to you. I just started talking and forgot to press record. And so we're doing a retake, but it's fine. It's totally fine because it's still going to be awesome. And so, yeah, so you know what? Using that as a vehicle for the next part of the discussion, why is it on brand for Good Enough for Now? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, you read my bio, and it's always interesting to sort of hear what pieces pull out, from others. And I think, I had gone through my life into my mid 40s, really spending a lot of energy crafting myself, my career, what it looked like on paper, on LinkedIn. My goals were, as many of us, right? Education, family, and credibility, taking on opportunities with brands that people would recognize because that was my identity. And met my husband. We started moving around the country before we had children. And when I became a mother, I also found myself in a transition in my career, as many of us do. And, really thinking about, I wanted to have it all, but I ended up doing it all. So, for example, when I started consulting, I thought, what a gift, because I could work from home, still be tied to my career, and be able to be present, when my toddler came home from preschool or when the nanny went home. And what that ended up actually feeling like was I was sort of everywhere and nowhere all at once. And I remember sort of feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to, get breakfast on the table, get kids to school, answer an email, get on a conference call, maybe go for a walk or exercise if I'm lucky, come back, work another 2 or 3 hours, get the kids back from whomever or wherever they were, take them to an activity, try to be present and happy, have some kind of dinner on the table or for myself that wasn't just, chicken nuggets, which, those did happen for sure. And then by the time my husband got home, try to have some kind of conversation with him that was interested in what the heck he did all day, because all I wanted to do was just, verbal diarrhea, like what went wrong that day, and take a kid and put him to bed. And I really
there was nothing left. Like you were trying to do it all, right? Yeah.
Trying to do it all. And, in the meantime, look good doing it, be smart doing it, get the bigger house, the better car, all of those ideas around striving, right? I was goal-oriented, achievement-oriented, right? It served me really well in a lot of ways, but it ended up all kind of coming together for me when my husband's career, fortunately, he got a promotion, and we were living in San Francisco at the time where we were raising our kids. We'd been there for 13 years, pretty happy, thinking that was where we were going to be. We were lucky enough to have bought a house there, which is not easy to do.
Easy, yeah.
And, we're kind of like, all right, check, check, check. We've got the list. And I was, maybe considering full-time work, what was my next chapter going to look like? And lo and behold, typical of life, it handed us a surprise. And so we moved here to the East Coast about 7 years ago and ended up landing in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is a beautiful suburb of New York City, while my husband was going to be commuting to Manhattan. So the next probably few years, I like to think of as like my shock and awe phase, because everything changed. I went from living in an urban city where I was walking all the time and seeing people I knew every single day, because San Francisco is quite a small place, ultimately.
And it's really diverse as well, though, isn't it? Like that's the thing about like the city, like you see and feel and hear lots of different things, right? Yeah.
Lots of stimulus all the time. And I'm somebody that, I love to travel. I love to meet new people. I'm extroverted. That really gets me going and makes me feel happy. And I found myself in a suburb where I was in my car alone. I knew nobody moving here, maybe a few friend referrals, but really nobody that like knew me, knew my family, knew my story, anything. And the good part of that is that's why I discovered podcasts. I would listen to podcasts because that would kind of help me feel like I wasn't alone. And then, try to keep in touch with friends. Like my support group was gone. So, the moms that you could ask, hey, what sport is, Johnny signing up for this fall? Do you want a carpool? I didn't have any of that. My kids were school age at that point, second grade, fifth grade. And my professional opportunities kind of dissolved a little bit. I was on a pause as well, but I also didn't really have networking connections in New York City or on the East Coast as much as I had in California. And I started, going into, I think at the time, was perimenopause, and my body was changing and I was feeling stress. And that was really not a great fun moment for me at all.
No.
And, on its face, I still had the checklist going, right? So we had the house, we had the dog, we had the cars, we had, all those things that were on my checklist, all the goals I'd had for myself. I was looking around saying, okay, everything I've wanted or thought I wanted, I have. I need a new dream.
Was there like something missing? Like I had that feeling myself. Mine was ultimately like a depression, actually, though, because I was like, why am I so fucking unhappy with life? And I was doing the checklist, the inventory, and then I was like, I'm happy enough, but there's something not quite right. For me, it was a depression, but I think for you, maybe it was just this climactic change of like going from this dramatic, like vibrant type life to the Stepford life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And losing our family. And you're the same as me in the fact that your friends are your family, right? Like they're the ones that drive you. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when kids are in elementary school and start to get older, their friends aren't your friends, just because they're friends with, David and Matthew's moms might not be your friends. And when they're elementary school, the kids really start driving who they spend time with, much more than, when you're organizing play dates and music class and things when they're babies and toddlers. And I don't know that people talk enough about this in terms of, how much that community of moms, I mean, we all know female friendships are really important to most of us. But wow, I felt such a vacancy in my life for people to share my experiences with. And, at the same time, there was a lot of good coming out of it. There were a lot of happy things. And I think to your point, Amanda, I felt similarly in terms of, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, can I just be happy? Do I want too much? Why can't I just feel content? Like, shouldn't I just, go play tennis every day and pick my kids
first world problems type
right
thing.
What is wrong with me? And so I spent a lot of time, maybe it was a bit of depression, I think, as well, looking back at it. But I also spent a lot of time starting to be curious about why. And a lot of what I started to discover about myself, which I got honest with myself about, was that so much of my inability to sort of roll with it and kind of take on new faces in my life, or at least the one that I was faced with some, excitement instead of apprehension, was I spent a lot of time in self-judgment and self-criticism. And it's sort of like I didn't even realize that voice was always sort of countering any good things that I would feel. So, it might be I would go and meet people at a new, a new parent event or something and feel happy to have met them. And, maybe a couple people said, we should grab coffee. And, okay, great. I'm making friends. I'm making motion to be part of this community. But then, I would come home and I would think, well, Mary was skinnier than I was. Like, oh my gosh, did you see the shoes she was wearing? Like, I don't know if I was dressed the right way. How do I answer the question of what I do in my life? Is it okay to just be a stay-at-home mom? Am I happy with that?
That's such great questions. And, like just talking about that, like the last 2 points, like how can I justify my day and how can I just be a stay-at-home mom? And I bet loads of people listening to this resonate with that, because I know I was at worked for IBM and then when I moved to Toronto with my firstborn, and Stuart our husbands knew each other, by the way, and our husbands both work in a bank, in the bank, or they did at the time. And Stuart was doing 120 hours a week. And I was like, I'm going back to IBM and I'm going to be an analyst and I want to do this. And the minute I had the kid, I was like, yeah, no, and no one else is looking after and I had the opportunity to be able to stay at home with my kids because Stuart was bringing the money in type thing. And it was a parenting decision that we made. But part of me always had this but I'm not doing enough and I'm not doing enough. And I think I didn't put enough emphasis on how important it was that I was present and showing up for my kids. And it sort of goes back to you saying, you'd handed that over to a nanny. So maybe there was an element of guilt there going, well, she's doing this, so then I have to be everything else in addition to that for my kids because I'm maybe letting them down, but then I can't let work down. And then my husband needs me in fucking hell. And yeah, I think we put way too much pressure on ourselves instead of the second kid comes along and I felt like I was much more present and calmer about my decision. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a very hard one to reconcile, I think.
Well, and I feel like too, that feeling like I grew up in the 80s. So, I was a huge roller skater. So that feeling of when you get off of roller skates and your body feels like it's still in motion.
No,
right.
I grew up in the 80s and never went on a pair of roller skates. What are you talking about?
Well, what are you talking about? Maybe when you're on a boat and you get off a boat and you still feel like you're in motion. Okay. Does that one work?
So, that was a way too American reference for me, but yeah.
We'll have to go roller skating sometime. It's fabulous.
Okay. All right.
So anyway, but that's kind of how I think, and when I look at it objectively now, it all makes sense to me. But going through it, I really couldn't see past my own feelings of guilt and judgment. But, I think I spent a lot of time building my career, building my adult life, really wanting to do better for myself, make my parents proud of me, be proud of myself, live up to some ideals I built up in my head. And because I was 35 when I started to have children, I'd had a career.
Same as well. I wonder whether that's part of the problem.
I think it might be. And now that I've kind of gotten to this sort of next phase of my life and really had to think about my self-identity, I think that's a lot of it. My identity was so tied to my education and my career, not to the exception of all else. I mean, I'm a fully formed person, but I think internally, I really felt like those were my, if I was a brand and you had to describe me, it would be where I worked, where I went to school, where I lived, and maybe some fun activity or travel I'd just done. It wasn't about my value system or what I wanted, for my community or, maybe how I showed up as a friend. But when you become a parent, it's so much more than, what's on your resume and how you show up for your kids. And then putting those pieces together to answer that question, what do you do? And all of the guilt in terms of, women who work and stay at home and maybe do both. And, what do we call that? How do we talk about that? If we were on the career trajectory and we decide to stay at home, have we left someone behind? Or are we just in the next transition phase of our lives?
I know, I think I remember this conversation with someone who said, I'm not getting this word for word, but it was along the lines of, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm not working at the moment. Oh, you just stay at home with the kids. And it was the just. I was like, just.
Oh, I hate the just.
So, I just wanted to punch them. Like it was like that type of thing. And it was like fulfillment. They almost took the fulfillment that I was in the moment. And I remember, I think I said this on the last podcast that we didn't record, but I remember there was a period of time where I would do something and I'd write down 9 o'clock, did alert, 10 o'clock, did that. And so when Stuart came home from work on an evening, he'd go, how was your day? And I'd go, oh, well, at 9 o'clock, I did this. And then at 10 o'clock, I did that. And then I went out for a walk and then I did this. And when Cameron napped, I cleaned the house and did it. And he went, what are you doing? And I went, I'm just telling you what I did. And he went, right. I know you don't sit around and do anything. You're home and you're with the children and you're present. And why you he basically said, why are you justifying what you do? And I don't know. And I still don't know the answer to that question. And I do believe it was societal pressure and expectations. That's what I think it was. And then what was interesting for me is my mom was a single parent and she worked in school dinners, right? So I don't think you have them in the US, but everyone in the schools in the UK growing up, you always had a proper cooked dinner with pudding and custard. It was horrible. But anyway, a lot of kids liked it. And my mum decided that she was going to work in that profession so that she could take us to school. She could be there where we ate lunch and she could be at home. And then she would have 6 weeks off in the summer for our holidays. And I always was a bit in the back of my mind, my dad's a nuclear engineer, even though he pissed off and left us. But then I'd be like, and my mum just works in the school dinners. And it was only when I had my kid, I just was like, that's the just I was using for my mum. And it was so disrespectful. And I talked about this loads of times and went, I never truly appreciated what you did. You were always there. It was so nice to have this constant present. And it didn't need justification, right?
Yeah. And, look, societal pressures, I think you put it well, things change and evolve, sometimes for the better and sometimes not. And, depending on where you live and the constructs of, your neighborhood and the type of parents you're friends with and the kinds of schools and the involvement you have can all be very different. And I think, until you learn to give yourself some grace with the fact that it doesn't have to, there's no end game here, right? I mean, today is what we're granted, right? I don't want to get too metaphysical about it, but, existential, I guess, about it. But, what we have is right in front of us. And I think that I spent a lot of time looking to the future. What was next? What was next? What was next? And now that I've hopefully gotten a little bit wiser and had some more experience in life and, seeing my kids become teenagers and realizing that, I might not love every minute of present parenting. I might not love every minute of, being the one at the house and the default parent when the school calls or things like that. But I can enjoy the pieces of it and take them for what matters most to me. And I have a choice and I have agency here. And I think that that's the big difference is getting out of kind of our own way to say, it isn't about you're just doing one thing or another. It's maybe just what you're doing for right now. And that right now can be this morning. It can be for 3 months. It can be for 3 years. It can be for the next 20. You don't have to have, there is no finish line in parenting either, by the way, although some people I think like to think it's college admittance, but it just is never over. And how can you enjoy it wherever you're at, whether it's in your career, in your personal life, in your relationships, if you can't dig into the present and make the choice really about taking what is good for you. And I think that once I kind of started thinking about my life in that way, and then also looking for reflections of who I was and other people that were serving me. So, what I mean by that is because I think, especially as women, we look to other women a lot for, validation for who we are, for what we're about. Are we a good friend? Are we, a good community member? Are we, cute and cool? And all those things that we started as teens, I think don't ever quite leave us in some way. And I think that, I really started to find a new community. I had to make a new community for myself here. And as hard as that was, I think it really has given me a gift of curating who is going to serve me in all aspects of who I am. So yes, I have friends who are related just to parenting my kids, right? They were at the same school as my children are, or I work with them on some volunteer basis. But I have a vast more diverse and interesting group of other people that I know because I became curious about myself and what I was interested in. And so, coming out or trying to sort of deal with my kind of identity crisis, as it were, in the move from the East to the East Coast and going through menopause and feeling all the feels there, which, I'm happy to get into if you want or not. That I started to really sort of question, well, if I can kind of do whatever right now because I don't have a path that's calling me, what am I interested in? And so I started a creative writing practice. I met a group of women I would have never met otherwise, single women, married women, LGBTQ women, women who lived in New York, women who lived, out where I live, women who lived across the country, who were writing about themselves in memoir nonfiction. And what that really allowed for me to do is start to see a reflection of my life, both from how they would respond to the things I would write about, of where I was or where I'd been in the story I was trying to tell, and also in their own stories. It helped me kind of start to understand, okay, wait, let's remember there's a big wide world out there. And just because you're stuck in your, SUV driving down the same road every day in Greenwich, Connecticut, doesn't mean you can't experience that. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a published author to get that, just being part of this group of women. And it led me to starting the podcast, which has led me to a whole new network of people, you included, though our husbands knew each other. But, because I started the podcast, my husband, talked to Stuart, was like, oh, Amanda's been doing that too. They should connect in ways that a LinkedIn profile and a search, on Instagram would have never done for me. So
yeah, no, it's so great. And I think that what I was going to sort of comment on with what you said there, it's like the great reframing, isn't it? And I think that whether it's menopause or whether it's midlife, that I went through something very similar. And I hear this all the time in my community. And it's almost like when you get through the other side, the turbulence is starting to calm down a little bit. There's a sense of ease that comes over us that allows us to do the reframing without as much judgment as previous. And I know that that's something that I've been able to let go. And it's been a game changer for me, but it was the hardest work to do. It was the hardest work for me. I'm always all over the physical and the emotional and the nutritional, you name it, but the actual digging deep and going, well, what now? What does this mean? What was the purpose of me going through this seismic event of perimenopause and all of the other things that came with it, if I'm not going to then learn from it and grow from it? And when you talk about the Good Enough for Now podcast, you talk about unexpected detours or false starts. And I think that your Connecticut experience is that, right? Mm-hmm. That was the shift that made you go, oh my God, fucking hell, what's now, what's now, what's now? And then you had to go through the process of like analyzing and digging deep. And then you were like, you know what? Like I am a creative person and I'm curious and I love people. And how can I evolve this into something that's passionate for me, that fulfills me and has purpose? And I think that if every woman can feel that sort of like shift, I would love that. And so what's a little bit of advice you would give to someone that's sort of not quite there yet? And I know that there's lots of women there that struggle with confidence, struggle with like knowing what's next.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the question. What do you do? What do you say to women who struggle to know what's next? Because I know it can be really, really hard for them.
Yeah. It's such a good question because I do think there is a benefit to being a person that looks for what's next, right? You know, it's motivating. It keeps you focused. It, you know, keeps you maybe looking outward. But I think that when you feel that feeling of what's next and you find yourself having asked that question and being in the same spot for a while, and your while could be different than mine. Your while could be 2 days. Mine was 3 years. Yeah. And, you know, and you know that you have skills, you have interests, you have value, is to really look inward and ask yourself a few more questions. You don't have to have the answers. But I think, you know, one of the things that I did and continue to do is really try to say, okay, well, if I'm worried about what's next, for example, like you and I were talking about this before we got on, you know, I'm about to conduct the last interview for season 2 of Good Enough for Now today. And, you know, it'll come out in June. And then I've got a child applying to college. I've got another one going into high school in the fall. And I sort of drove this train and now I'm going, oh, wait a minute, right? What's next for me? One of the things I've been doing to really stop myself from judging so harshly my own ideas or what I might try or not try is I just make a list of questions. And I say to myself, I'm not going to answer these questions. I'm just going to keep a running list. And I'm going to maybe look back at that list in a week. Maybe I'll look back at that. I'll get a cup of coffee. I'll look at that list in a month and I'll see if maybe some of those answers have already been taken care of themselves, or I have a few more questions to ask. Or maybe the question that I originally asked wasn't great. Now it's something else. It gives me time to think. And I think that the space you can create for yourself to connect to who you are and what you want will help you define what's next, whether it is today, your career, your relationships, you know, what you want to have for dinner, how you want to work out, you know, but really being connected to that self-awareness of who you are and what you want and what feels right to you is the best compass for going to the next phase of your life with less doubt.
There's a concept that I talk about, and it's always been used in my coaching called notice and name. It's sort of a psychological tool, and it's the idea that, you know, it sounds similar to you writing questions down. When a question comes down, you write it down, you acknowledge it, but then you move on. And notice and name is a similar type concept. Like you have a feeling and you don't know why. And it's all, I'm mad, sad, or glad, whatever. Any of those feelings, acknowledge it, hear it, let it go. And the process of actually the acknowledgement and not acting on it and like just letting it go in the moment makes you be completely present. It just brings you back. And I love that. And it can be things like, it can be helpful when you're doing nutrition. Say if you go to eat the muffin. I mean, it's a really silly example, but there's a muffin there and you go to grab it because it's 2:00 in the afternoon and you've got like a bit of a sugar dip. So you go for the muffin. Notice and name just means stop. Do you want the muffin? Am I hungry? Let's just hear that. Maybe I don't want it and that's fine. Maybe I do want it. That's fine. I'll eat it. Like it's just making that a pause to understand how it can be like beneficial to you or not. But the same can happen with like life decisions as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a young son that's similar to you who's started to get panicky. He's 16. He's like, well, I don't know what courses to choose for school. And I don't know which university to go to. And I don't know what I'm going to do at university. And I don't know this and I don't know that. And who knows what they want. And I was like, okay, that what's happening is you're projecting now into the future. You don't know so much and it's making you have anxiety. So let's notice and acknowledge those feelings, right? That you've got. So what can you do now, right now, to make that feel appropriate and calming for you, well, I think you need some structure. I think we need to review the courses with you. I think you need to get good grades at school. I think you need to focus on these things. And he was like, oh, really? You can do that? And I think that that's what happens, the overwhelm of like not having a plan and not noticing what's happening can derail us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I see this all the time when I hear women talking, and I wish it was just something that was easy to explain to women. But I know for me, it took me, I would say 3 or 4 years before I just was like having these conversations and going, oh, it's okay to feel like that. It's okay. I'm not going to act on it now. I'm just going to yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My husband and I have a joke. It's like, get yourself back to neutral, you know? And I think, maybe some of it is learning how to parent emotional teenagers, but that really tested my waters, because I think you really have to let go a bit of knowing the answers and controlling the outcomes. And I think especially when you've been somebody who is really productive and intellectual and capable, and that's part of who you are and the confidence you have, it sometimes can feel, and I could say for me, like it feels scary to me sometimes not to know, because I built a career and a persona and an identity around having knowledge and being smart and being capable. And I think that that's where I've discovered that's a misperception of my own. It's not, letting go doesn't mean you're all of a sudden an idiot about your life.
Giving up. It doesn't mean that.
You're not going to make the biggest mistake. In fact, if I think about it, the biggest mistakes I've made is when I've tried to control things too much. I didn't know it in the moment, sadly, but that's the whole point. Is, you have to learn these things. But, I think also just, if you can't let go and connect to kind of what you need right now, how can you enjoy it?
Yeah. That's a really great thing to say, because I think we rush through life and we forget that joy is part of it, and we should be trying to like cultivate that and look for that. I remember you saying something about having this great mourning, this great loss at the age of 37. Was that your menopause? Do you think that was what was happening there?
I think I was 47, but yes.
I'm 37. I just got 10 years off your age. Take it.
It's okay. Look how much younger I am. I'll take it, Amanda. But yeah, I feel like, in that shock and awe phase, as I described, being here, everything happened at once. And I definitely felt like, when I didn't have a period for a year and the gynecologist finally told me, oh, well, that means you're in menopause. And, that was it. I didn't want any more children. It wasn't about that I wanted to have another child. But I think I did have this feeling of, that was kind of the last straw. I had already felt a lot of loss of the place I loved living, the people I knew and loved that were my family there, the career that I thought I would continue to have and go back to, the loss of that like outside active life and, stimulus, and, even silly things like I started playing tennis at the age of 40. And I decided to be really competitive. And I had this group in California that I played with, and we had the best time together. And we would have wine after matches. And it was just like my happy place. And it was an escape for me from, my daily to-do list. And it was just total joy. It didn't hurt that when I played, I looked outside at a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. Of course, that helps everyone feel happy.
Nice.
Yeah. And then when I moved here, I found, you're playing inside in a bubble. For those of you that don't know, when you live in wintertime and snowtime and you want to play tennis, they bubble the courts with this huge plastic bubble and blow air in it. And it feels very depressing, probably about 2 months into winter. And so, I'm playing inside in a bubble. I'm playing with a lot of really high achieving people who take it very seriously, who I don't know, who don't know me. I'm worried about doing it well. And all the joy of tennis was gone, just absolutely gone. And I think, I looked at it like, I got real serious about it and thought, well, I guess this is just what we're supposed to do here. I'll get really serious and I want to up my rating. And like, I came home one night and I smashed a racket. I was so mad at myself. And, my whole family is looking at me like, have you lost your mind? Like,
who's this crazy banshee that's just
right,
walked into the house?
And that was in that moment when I was feeling like, who am I? Like, what am I doing with my life? I feel miserable, and I'm judging myself for feeling miserable. And now I'm getting old. Now I'm in menopause. Like, what the fuck? And, I'm having insomnia. I'm having crazy anxiety for no reason in a way that I'd never experienced before. Sex is not fun. It feels uncomfortable. And if I want it, my libido just completely went flat. And I couldn't have a normal emotional. I was mad when I would typically not be mad. And I was sad when I would typically be happy. Like, my emotions were just all over the place. And when all of that converged, COVID kept on top of that. Teenagers kept on top of that. And I really felt like I was losing my mind, and not just my youth. And fortunately, I had the presence of an awareness of, I still like my husband. I want to be married to this person. I love my
He's
children.
all right.
He's all right. Yeah, I'll take him. So, but we were 20 years into a marriage at this point, and I just was like, what is going on? And so I did two things. I looked outward. I went back to therapy, which I had done years ago, just for a little while. I went to therapy, found a really great therapist, and that I could just talk to about all of these feelings, because unloading them on my friends and my husband were not probably the best idea.
That's not fair, is it? Yeah.
Not fair to them. And then I went to see a doctor to understand what my body was really doing. I had lost about 35 to 40 pounds, a year or two before that. I was feeling great. And now all of a sudden, like, if I looked at a croissant, I would gain 3 pounds. I couldn't have red wine with
you know terrible. What? Croissants are little bitches like that. You don't even need to eat them, and it goes straight to your hips. I know. Not
and
fun.
I love them. I love
unless
them.
Unless you're French, and it doesn't hurt at all.
I don't mind. It doesn't. It's something about their chemistry. Maybe they were born to be able to eat them. But
but seriously though, like it just was this overwhelm, right? It was everything.
Completely. And so after she ran all the tests, and she was really, thorough, and we did lots of blood work, and she's like, well, no wonder why you're feeling this way. You have absolutely no testosterone, no estrogen at any readable levels. And so no wonder you're feeling like this. And so I started hormone replacement therapy to try it, and, very managed by her, I get blood work regularly. We look at how it metabolizes in my body, to do it in the safest, most conscientious way possible. And also to assess the fact that I didn't have some risk factors, fortunately, that other people might. I was in good health otherwise. And it made a world of difference, those two things. And I think really what they are, outside of what they're called, to your point about naming it, is self-care. Is that I really had to say to myself, like, I deserve to spend some time on my health, on my body, on my mental wellness, because I'm not that old. I have a lot of life to live, and I want to enjoy it. And thank God, like, I had the presence of mind to, sit with that and try to, make some moves to do better.
But it's like the 2 or 3 years, like, because I had 2 or 3 years in the wilderness too. And it was just not knowing and not understanding why we were having all of these feelings and symptoms that you're not getting help from or easy access to. I'm hoping that has shifted a bit just because so many of us are talking about it now. But the idea that I think I would describe it as, I remember, and I'm not going to knock 10 years off my life, but I was 48 when I went through menopause completely. And I think I was about 44, 45. And I remember looking in the mirror and going, I don't like you. And I don't recognize you. I'm a huge extrovert too. And I just didn't like people. I didn't like myself. I didn't like my family. All of it, right? I just was withdrawn completely from participating. And now I look in the mirror and I like what I see. I like the person I am. There's no judgment there. And that's took a bloody lot of hard work to get there. And I wish that for every woman. That's what my ideal world would be, is where we can, right? And I understand how difficult it is, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why, I feel the same way. And I think there's so much to be gained from being open about it. And, I'd call myself like, I'm the crazy lunch friend that's like, oh, I've just been on hormone replacement therapy. And, you should talk, like, I have a therapist referral for you. Like, I mean, if it comes up, I'm that person that's like, oh, and read Metapocalypse, Amanda's book. And, because
good. That was what I'm saying. Yeah, good.
I just do, but, but it's true. And I think, I maybe because I was a marketer and I've naturally been somebody that's interested in the narrative, right? That I do think it is about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that we share with other people that really make us feel we're all together in something. And, every single
But we are. That's
yeah.
so great to say that, because we are. It might be unique for us all, but we are all in this together. Yeah.
Everyone will go through menopause. Every woman with the uterus will go through, will go through menopause. And so it doesn't have to be a black box, and it doesn't have to be something that you punish yourself over. You can get help. And so, while menopause is not the focus of my good enough for now work, I think it does really drive this idea that, speaking about the fact that we, and I talk to men, women, people who are educators, leaders, luminaries, writers as well. And everyone's story has a similar arc. Everyone gets to a place in their life where something they thought they wanted isn't serving them, or they find themselves on this detour or bump in the road that they have to then say, okay, wait, what do I want? How do I want to go forward? And how can I craft myself or learn something new that will help me to do that? It's not a final answer. It's not an A+ on a test. It's not being the most beautiful or skinny or, macho. It's how do I live in my human existence as myself and do this project work, parenting, book, whatever the idea is that they're working on, do it with some integrity and authenticity to who I am. And I think that's, for me, I think that's universal.
Oh, it is. It totally is. But I think that it's at this age that we tend to reflect on it more. I was watching an interview recently, and I can't remember who it was with, but it was essentially like, we just don't think about those things leading up to being in our 20s. But then late 20s to mid 40s, we're all obsessed with responsibility, jobs, children, mortgages, debt. And then it's only as we start going into that second part of our lives that we start to stop and pause and just go, I actually feel pretty damn happy now, but how can I forge this path forward? Like you say, a bump in the road or a detour that matches what I want, right? And so to me, that's an opportunity. I feel like menopause, having long COVID, you name it, I've got so many examples, but we're horrible in the moment, but we're an opportunity to pause and look forward and go, well, what direction do I want to take now? And I think that I really like those wise words you gave us then, because I think that it opens the possibility for others, right? We all wrestle with those things.
Yeah, absolutely. We all do. And we'll continue to, I mean, I just, I had gained, just this is a funny story, but, I'm still figuring it out. I will continue to be figuring it out, right? I am not a, piece of marble sculpted perfectly, and I never will be. And I'm kind of okay with that, right? In fact, I sort of am, don't tell anyone, but I'm kind of excited that that's the case, because I think that, if you're never done, then you're always able to experience something new. And that's so core to kind of one of the things I like best about myself, is that I'm willing to be a beginner, and I think it's fun. And, I had told you I had gone through a weight loss project, before COVID, and I had used a nutritionist to help me because I realized I did not really know how to eat. I didn't understand why you eat protein at certain times of the day, or how many carbs you should have, or the sugars, or how these things interact. I just was kind of an idiot about it. For as educated as I was, I really didn't know. And so I worked with her. It was very slow and healthy. And when I gained the weight over COVID, I was like, well, okay, I've got 10 pounds. Maybe I want to get back off, which is nothing. But, in my mind, that's what I need to get back, again, starting to get goal oriented. And so I went back to her. And I can't believe I'm admitting this, but for 12 months, I've literally been hovering around the same 3 to 4 pounds. I gain it, I lose it, I gain it, I lose it. Pretty much the same. My clothes all fit fine. I'm pretty happy with the way I look. And I finally like broke up with my nutritionist yesterday because I was like, why are we doing this? I'm good with how I am.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine.
I don't need new jeans. And in fact, I'm just creating a codependency with you that somehow I like haven't learned anything and you have to tell me what to eat. Like, this is just stupid. And she kind of, she was lovely about it. And, of course, like she was like, you're fine. Like, you're right. But it's like, I am a 51-year-old woman and still dealing with being able to give myself permission to, be a size 8, maybe forever. It's fine, and, give myself permission to know that I have the tools I need to be healthy and that I can, I can do it. I'm not going to go, eat a bag of tomatoes every day.
Right. But when you do, it's fine. And I also think, like, to add on to that, I think give yourself permission to know that you don't need permission either. Like, and I think that
I love that.
The amount of people that I know that are like, well, am I allowed to do that? Who fucking cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Stop getting down into the nitty gritty weeds of it all. But I love that. So listen, we have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but I've really enjoyed this recorded episode of my podcast with all due respect. We did it. I'm so proud of us. I'm so proud of us. So we know what's next. You're taking a little bit of a break when the new season comes out in June. So tell us where we can go to find that and yeah, what to look forward to.
So the show is called Good Enough for Now, and you can listen to it on all the places where you find podcasts. The website is goodenoughfornowpod.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at goodenoughfornowpod, or you can DM me directly at _S Kruse, and it's SKRUSE.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Steph, for coming on. I've really enjoyed our chat. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the new season. And thanks for your words of wisdom.
Oh, thank you. It was so nice to talk to you, Amanda. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like what you hear, then why not subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? You see, when you do this, it helps to raise the profile of my show and attract new listeners. And it also allows me to continue to deliver valuable content with great guests. And in return for you doing that, I will send you my 12-week core-focused program called Abs on Fire as a thank you. Simply drop me an email at amanda@amandathebe.com and I'll wing that your way. Bye.